morning, and welcome to your daily Gay Face, just like normal.
Yes,
Cue
like
was
normal.
off.
Huh?
I said my cue was off.
No,
just
it's
like
fine.
Normal.
It's new. It's only our second time
It's
on
our
this
second
particular
time.
platform.
What's this called? Stream what?
StreamYard.
StreamYard.
Yes.
All right. I hope that it looks lovely. It looks lovely in here.
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
hoping
Yes.
that-
Last week or the week before, your problems were your Wi-Fi,
Where
your
I
Montana
was.
Wi-Fi.
Well, I was in Montana in the middle of a mountain.
Yeah.
Which was lovely. It really was. And if
I always
anyone
wanted to go. Yeah.
oh my God, if anyone wants to go to Montana, I can tell you all the good things to do there. The entire time I was
Good
there.
things that normal people do. Hiking
well,
up a mountain, or
I was just gonna say, well, John had altitude sickness the entire time we were there, and I thought it was gonna be me being the asthmatic, right?
Yep.
And he's asthmatic too, but oh yeah,
didn't adjust.
Yeah. No.
Interesting.
But I have some. I'll share this with you after. But I have some great video of every time he was like, I'm sort of awful. This is like my torture spot.
Yeah.
Like he's climbing up the mountain. He's like, I can't breathe. And I've got like video going, there's John coming on the hike with me.
Okay.
We're at 10,000 feet. And he's like, I'm laughing. I can't help it. It's awful. It's like this little sadistic song.
Oh, yeah, really. Poor guy's just going along with the hike with you.
I know. Well,
He's got a bad knee. He's having
bad
trouble with
knee,
altitude.
He's got the hernia. He's got the
Yeah.
bicep. So, so the hiking. So there were lots of normal people hiking, by the way. Lots of normal people hiking. So that was a very common
Up a
thing.
mountain at 10,000 feet.
Well, Big Sky,
Yeah.
Montana is at 11,288. So
okay.
I did not go to the top of Lone Peak because we ran out of time. But I was close. I came close, and I was inching my way up throughout the week testing my limit to see what would happen. And certainly when I was there, we did one hike with this lovely set of 4 men from LA, and we happened to meet, shocking, on the trail. And we were all huffing and puffing because as you elevate,
by comparison, Mount Washington's what, 30?
62,
Oh, 62.
62 something,
Okay.
63
Yeah.
something, I think, or 66. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at our base camp, essentially where we were staying in Big Sky is at 6,500 feet, and people were struggling at 6,500 feet. I wasn't, because I do Mount Washington.
Yep.
And then where we actually stayed, where we were at our house, was a little over 7,500 feet. So then when we went hiking, we went another 4,000. Oh, and I know you saw this, but I got my moose.
He did, yes.
Did you like my moose?
Yes.
So that was a great story because we had just finished that big, tall hike that we had gone on. That was our biggest one. And we came out, we were driving around. We'd always look for animals because you saw them everywhere out there. And so we had just come off this little road called Beehive Basin Road, and he had paused to turn left, and I was like, oh, and all of a sudden that big mama that you saw, she jumped out in front of us, which isn't part of the video. That was the second time that we saw her because we turned back around and caught her coming across the other side. She came out, we screeched to a halt, everyone behind us screeched to a halt, and then John started to go again, and then all of a sudden the baby, I'm like, the baby, so that because the baby came flying across the street. So we banged a Yui and went back up on the side where we knew she was going to come through the other side. And that's the video you saw.
That's nice.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So I saw several moose when we were there, but that was my best shot. The very first day we were there, we saw moose up on the ski trail, and I got a shot, and then realized that my very long 75 by 600 millimeter lens did not have the stabilizer on it. So when I hadn't turned on the stabilizer because I was just so excited.
Yep.
Yeah, the pictures didn't come out so hot.
No. But you saw it. That's what counts.
Yes, exactly. But it was great. So and normal people go to Yellowstone, and we got to do Yellowstone a couple times. Yep. And so I love the entering Wyoming, entering Montana. You go in and out of Montana and Wyoming a whole bunch. When you're going through, it's awesome. Have you been there?
No.
So on a daily, I got to see packs and packs of bison, and I saw some wolves, I saw some coyote, I saw some elk,
sounds
some
great.
antelope, bald eagles everywhere, like along the Gallatin and Madison River. It was great. John caught a fish. Did I send you that picture?
Yeah, I saw it on his.
Oh, you saw it on his feed,
yeah.
right? They were so proud. They at the Gallatin River, whatever their store is, were so proud of that fish. That's like what they're going to use for their shocker. John's going to get to be
nice. He's the spokesman.
Yeah, he's going to be because that was one of the biggest fish that they've caught in forever. So
Excellent.
So we had a very good time. It was very cold there.
Yeah, you were saying.
And then the last 2 days we were there, it was very warm, which was good. So, and then, but it was just very nice. It was lovely. And, you know, I had any given time, I'd like go outside and there'd be a fox on my back deck or a grizzly bear. We saw grizzly bears. It was very cool. Coming through Mammoth Hot Springs, there was a grizzly bear walking along the edge of the road, and the ranger was like, move along, you know. Like, yeah, but I want a picture.
It's a bear jam.
Exactly. Did
you see any male moose with like the big antlers?
So that baby in the picture that you saw the video, that's a male moose, but we did not see any with racks, but we did see elk and mule deer with full big racks that were beautiful. Especially at night when coming back from dinner, they were all over the road. So you had to go very slow or else you'd hit them.
How were the restaurants?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent food. I ate elk. I'm going to hell.
Why?
Because I'm not an eater of those things, as you know. But I was like, fine, I'll do it. It was actually okay. It didn't taste gamey. It was good.
Yep.
Because I don't eat venison because it's Bambi.
No, elk is not gamey.
No, and it was fine. Yep. And I've had bison many times before, and that was fine.
Yeah,
but then once I saw them out in the meadow with all their babies, I'm like, can't do that.
Yeah, well, there's a farm in Haverhill that raises bison.
Oh, is there really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And at one point, it was on my daily trip. I'd go by see the bison all the time, and they're selling bison meat. And I'm going, I watch those bison grow up. You see the calves, and
then they're gone.
I'm not going to eat that bison.
See, this is my point.
That's why you shouldn't have too personal a relationship with your food. Which is why I don't eat lobster, by the way.
Just eat vegetables. And, well, I was going to say, or not eat the things I ate last night. Right?
Yeah. Let's not go there.
Anyway, so it was wonderful. I highly recommend a trip to Montana and Big Sky. If you can get out there, certainly do it. And
Jesse, that's Kimball's farm. That's right, Jesse.
It's what?
Jesse chimed in on the farm in Haverhill, Kimball's farm. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. I love Kimball Farm.
Oh, yeah.
Have you been?
Oh, yeah. I live out there.
I haven't been. Well,
I used to live out there.
The crowds this summer were insane, so I stayed away from it because everyone needed something to do.
You a corn maze person?
A what?
Are you a corn maze person?
I've done them, but so I'm an apple picker. It's coming.
Oh, you're an apple picker.
I'm an apple picker. I'll do that and have apple cider donuts, and then that'll probably make me, feel the way I do today. Yes, I had things with gluten in them.
Yep.
So any other questions, Lou, about Montana?
No, nothing we need to get to here. I've got access to you. I can ask questions.
Huckleberry.
Oh, yeah.
You
said Lou, you promised me huckleberries.
I brought him back huckleberries. You know where they're sitting? On my bedside table.
Okay.
So that's where they are this morning. But they are coming back to you, and I will bring them. So it was excellent because most of the food out there is made with some variation of huckleberries, and you could be hiking along and get a handful of huckleberries as you're walking through, which is why the bear were around a lot because that's their favorite berry. Are they good as just berries? They're delicious. Yeah, very delicious along the wild roadside. Nice. So what else do we have to talk about? I have resiliency and relevance today. Oh, the R's. Yeah, because when I was out there, I was talking about these are different R's. You do the three R's. Right. These are different R's, right? My typical 3 R's are being rational, reasonable, and realistic. And this time, good morning, Joe. This time, this is about being resilient and having relevance because over the weekend, although I was in Montana for X amount of time, I was doing a really cool thing with the Human Baton and this project that they did over the weekend for athletes and veterans called the Shadow Ops and Special Ops. And it was like a really cool experience for veterans and Human Batons and people of the armed forces and also fighter pilots and so on and so forth. And several topics in conversation on Saturday evening where I came up about, how people are resilient and how to find relevance in your life in a variety of different ways. And kind of goes off of what I was talking about when I was in Montana about feeling relevant by taking breaks. You become more purposeful when you kind of regroup and put it out there and have strength in your your confidence and so on. So I thought those two R's today would be not my typical R's, relevance and resiliency.
How does relevance fit into the overall picture? Because relevance sounds like looking for external validation, or it can be.
Well, it can be, but so it's
relevance to whom?
So it's relevance to oneself. Like, do you feel relevant enough? And are you seeking outside sources to give you a sense of purpose? Are you giving yourself a sense of purpose? And do you feel confident enough in yourself without the validation of others?
Yep.
Which builds resiliency. And one of the reasons why that came up was I was talking to an Air Force pilot, and we were talking about what makes people in general, and we were talking about the gender difference between men and women and their resiliencies and mental toughness. And it was quite fascinating just because of his resiliency is the same, in my mind, is the same as what I would say other people talk to me about in their own day-to-day lives that are not up in the air flipping planes around and 700 miles an hour, right? But just the way that what gives you your sense of purpose? Like, he feels a sense of purpose from, like, say, flying the plane, but where does that really stem from? What is that really giving him and how do you translate that to everyday normal people life, which is what's giving you relevance? Is it something that is external, which is, there's nothing wrong with external, but how are you then translating inside to give you some kind of resiliency to make you mentally tough? So that what if that external isn't there, which many times it's not, and how do you get reinforced without having it to constantly come up and say, you're doing a good job, or we like you, or this is important?
I'm guessing the resilience for a pilot is prioritizing your relevance. In other words, I can handle this.
I can handle anything.
I can handle the grocery store, right? That type of thing.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Comparing apples to trucks. Yes.
Right.
Yes, literally.
So people that are doing a high stakes thing like that takes a lot of mastery and some time, it gives you confidence in other areas that aren't as challenging. Well, some people make to be as challenging.
Well, right. And one of the pieces of that is how, try to translate it to everyday life is, how do you become resilient when your relevance isn't that you're a jet fighter or something like that? And how do you not get your ego in the way? There's all these really interesting pieces of, there's fear. It's the same for anybody. There's fear of failure, fear of success, things that make you feel like you're going to do a good job, or people are going to like you or not, or are you going to perform well or not? And
sense of self.
All these pieces go into a sense of self that make up your resilient, mental toughness. It's really about, like, are you mentally ready? Are you prepared all the time to be your best performance? Or even, even if it's not your best performance, are you doing the best you can given what you've got? And oftentimes you find that people do not do their best when their own personal sense of resiliency and relevance is down.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that I see, a lot of my patients don't have that as a consistent factor. And I think most people, I think if I thought about it, most people have that waxing and waning. I think, I can't speak to that particular pilot because I don't know him well enough, but I would imagine, given the conversation I had, I would imagine he would say that he absolutely has had the up and down, just given some of the things he said about, his career, of how he's come through and done all those things. But I think general everyday people, everyone has the ability to live the elite athlete lifestyle, in their mindset, whether or not it's resilient enough or trained enough to do that, to be self-sufficient enough. It always goes back to, like, what you just said, the self. How do you do that and maintain it for yourself? To
abuse a financial term, I'm guessing a lot of that waxing and waning is about sequence of returns. In other words, if you are in a bad streak of decisions or performances, then your confidence and resiliency is waning.
Right.
With a lot of people, but it's tough to keep that consistent. Well, okay, it's been a bad week, but I'm going to go back at it tomorrow, or I'm going to go back at it next week. Right.
And so what do you think, given what you just said, that what do you think would make the difference between someone who would go back at it versus someone who gets down and then kind of crumbles?
It goes back to sense of self.
Yeah.
Because especially from an athlete's point of view, because again, I was much more mentally healthy as an athlete than I am as a person. But
well, they are one and the same. We keep talking about
well,
this.
they should be, but they aren't. It's like,
right, I know.
if you have confidence in your abilities, you go out and you have a bad game. It's easy if you have a good sense of self as an athlete.
Right.
It's easy to just say, okay, that wasn't great. We'll
right.
get them next week. We're on to Cincinnati.
Right.
To quote my mentor.
Right. We're on to Cincinnati.
Yeah, that type of mentality where, okay, that wasn't great, but I'm good. I can handle this. So let's get back at it.
So then okay, so because we have a lot of people listening, right? So how do we then translate that to, if you're feeling like that confident on the field or in the pool or on the floor, whatever, then how do you move that over into your everyday life?
It's tough because the transition between athletics and life is that athletics are quantifiable, largely quantifiable. You make gains in practice. You see it, you feel it, you can quantify it. Obviously, score, your performance gives you an indicator. Life's not always like that. Right? And you rarely get clean wins and clean losses in life. There's always a little bit of a mix.
There's always something there.
Yeah.
Right. Or there's the confounding variables that influence you or that make you have self-doubt or that could contribute to that.
So
yes,
going back to the key,
yes,
I think, of mental health, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I will.
Is the ability to attenuate your focus.
Yes. Yes. It always comes back to where can you shift your focus, attenuate, right? So shifting focus over to,
because you're going to get a wide range of stimulus and returns.
Right.
What do you choose to focus on?
Exactly.
What do you choose to build on?
Right. And so if you're choosing to focus on something that's constantly, nipping at your heels, or something that feels like, because, people give in to it, right? It's easier sometimes. That road is so much easier, because especially if the mentality has been taught to you that the negative will get in and that's what counts. And, there's not a lot of like hope out there, faith, which goes to parts of relevancy and resiliency. Then, the attenuation of focus has to be much stronger. So again, that has to start from early on in childhood all the way up through, because people will say, oh, 22 years old, I don't have, that piece. And that piece is obvious to me sometimes that's missing. And that's really hard at 20, 30, 40, 50 to start training. It doesn't mean you can't, but it means it's really strong behavioral modification to be able to pull that in, to not be externalized, because we're such a culture of, we perform for others, not for ourselves.
Yep.
We look for, the self, the self-recognition, but it's not really self-recognition. It's about others just validating our experience to give us the next piece that goes, okay, I'm good enough to move forward. Hey, there's that good enough thing.
Yeah. It's the glass is half empty or half full thing,
right.
Because you can look at a set of circumstances and you can look at your successes and failures, and one of which you're going to think is the aberration.
Right.
If you're confident and you feel strong and you understand what you're doing and you have a good sense of self in that particular endeavor,
right.
You think the bad thing is the aberration. Okay, I'll come back tomorrow.
Right.
But if you don't have that confidence, your good things are the aberration. I just got lucky there. I'm really a loser.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then that's where the imposter, comes in, that I'm an imposter. People see through me. I'm transparent. I'm not as good as I thought I was, because when it's not a consistent success and there's that one little blip on the screen, all of a sudden someone thinks, oh no, I'm going to be found out for the imposter that I am. And in fact, there's not an imposter. It's just the fact that the confidence level for being less than perfect, which goes into those 2 R's today, is a big piece of that. Is if you're perceiving yourself as less than perfect and think that other people will see you that way, it impacts the way you then perform.
I think, unfortunately, life, though, a lot of times in life, you are somewhat of an imposter because you're kind of taking it as it comes. Yeah. And I think parenting is a great example of this. The first time you have a 13-year-old is the first time you have a 13-year-old. Right. You're learning the job as you go.
Right.
Nobody really knows what they're doing.
Right.
You just, it's a,
winging it.
Yeah, you're winging it. Yeah, you really are. And so it's tough to feel that kind of confidence, but hopefully by the time you're 13, you've had some successes, you've done some things right. You've learned some things, from, lessons that you picked up along the way. So again, it's just a matter of focusing on, it's a matter of your self-image.
Right.
And, focusing on the positive and the negative. I know it's not, everyone rolls their eyes. It seems simple, but.
Well, so out of my conversation this weekend, as I was coming back on the plane this weekend, I was thinking about the different aspects that do go into building that self-confidence or building that resiliency level. We'll call it the resiliency level in people. And so, and it's kind of ethereal, but I was thinking, okay, so I think one of the number one things to have is your knowledge base, whether that's something academic or skill-based or whatever's, involving your day-to-day life, right?
Yep.
Keeping it not to fighter pilots and elite athletes, but to normal people, right? So as much knowledge, skill, you're honing things so that you have that base, the foundation of just the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then resiliency then comes from then being really authentic and genuine. I think people that are authentic and genuine tend to have better resiliency when they're not, looking fake.
Yep.
Or they're acting like they're genuine and authentic. And then, in their knowledge base, it kind of, where I'm going with this. Yeah. You can see, like, if you have a foundation that's got good, solid knowledge and, acumen, and then you have authenticity to it, they feed each other. And when there's that self-doubt, that fakeness or lack of self comes in because the ego gets in the way.
Yep.
And so the authenticity kind of looks, it's got that edge to it. So having the knowledge with authenticity, I think empathy for self and others, like understanding, like, today wasn't a good day in this particular aspect, but all these other aspects were good. Like, I've had conversations with my friends over in Sweden that help, that I do help with the THB program. We've talked about having that empathy piece of, like, if you look at the whole day as, oh, I didn't get that one thing done and my whole day's a failure, versus, oh, I did all these other things, I just didn't get that one thing done. And, so it's a shift. So it's a matter of reframing it. So having the knowledge, the authenticity, the empathy. And then I was sort of like thinking, okay, then what would be the other piece? Because I feel like there's one other little piece in there. And so I'm sort of still toying with what else builds the resiliency in that. And
well, let me try that, because as I was thinking about that, and you're talking about knowledge and emphasizing knowledge, I was thinking one of the important things that I rely on a lot of times is, like, I'll sit there with a problem that I haven't done well with. And a lot of times I can feel like, oh, okay, I'm going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
You get the skill of being able to learn, being able to ask people. That's something people have difficulty with.
Right.
I mean, getting into the student position, and saying, okay, how do I do this? How do you do this? What do you find that's successful in taking that and figuring it out? And I think that's a really important part of resiliency, because people who feel like they can figure things out, given enough time, or given enough knowledge, accumulating the knowledge, that keeps you confident, that keeps you going forward.
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that asking for help, or being not always in the know, and being able to say, I don't know that, and putting the ego aside, and the ego being your reality manager of, like, to protect you, because that's what it does. Is that was what you're speaking to in large part. Is
that's a large part of that skill of being able to figure things out.
Yeah, is because oftentimes, and you and I talk about this, people really try to figure things out on their own because they don't want other people to see that they don't know.
Right.
And I think one of the greatest skills people can have is to have the humility. Maybe that's the fourth thing, is having the humility to say, I need help, or I don't know the answer. I mean, when I'm teaching class all the time at the college, people ask me something, and if I don't know, I have professors that I know that just make stuff up, and because they want to make sure that they are in the know.
They're the professor,
and they're the professor, they're the expert, and I'll say, I have no idea, or I'm going to look at that up, or if you look that up and tell me, that'd be great. You teach me, because I don't know.
Yeah, let's figure this out.
Right. So because I think that collaboration, and it goes to the authenticity and genuineness of being able to be a real person and actually have more resiliency, because you trust yourself more, that you're not supposed to know everything. Even if you're the expert, you're not supposed to know everything. Everything's, everyone teaches somebody something all the time.
I think humility is a good one, because what humility also allows you to do, it prevents catastrophizing failure.
Right.
And often failures, negativity, bad results build quicker than positive results.
Right.
People somehow, for some reason, you get 2 or 3 negative results that can really destroy your confidence in what you're doing. Get a couple positive results, you seem to need more. But negativity is tough. So having that humility, that's like, okay, I don't know everything yet. I didn't do this right, but hey, I learned a lesson.
Yeah, and right. And so I think humility and being humble, to be able to know oneself and to be okay enough with oneself to then be able to implement those other skills is probably the key. As I'm sitting there, I'm looking around in my head going, okay, because that would make it so that you're not always worried whether or not you're going to fail because you don't have enough of the skill or the knowledge base, or where you have to fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Which is, there's nothing wrong with faking it till you make it, as long as you're not out there purporting yourself to be this something that you're not.
Yeah.
Because you open yourself up to vulnerability. And that's a lot of the reason why people get stuck in poorer resiliency, is because they fake it on the outside so much till they make it. But it's such an easy, vulnerable target to see through and get through, because the person's sort of wearing it all out or leaking out all over the place because they don't,
The irony about this is that to learn these lessons, you have to have the ability to try new things, because that's where you get these gains and grow confidence.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But if you don't have the humility to fail, you'll never go out and, well, I can't, I've never done that, so I'm going to look like a fool. So I'm not going to do that. Well, okay, go out and look like a fool. A few weeks later, you'll be much better at it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, being imperfect.
Yeah.
Being seen as imperfect, and that, and that's a very big social cultural thing for us here in the United States. I can speak to that, is that we just train ourselves and train each other into such a very tight space of, it's like running the marathon. What's your time? If I told people that I wasn't under, 5 hours, God forbid, it's like that.
That's the silliest thing.
But
I'm guessing people who don't run marathons are worried about time.
Right. And so if you're not 50 years old telling people that you're running 3:30s, as a female, for instance, right, then there's a judgment there. And being able to have self-resiliency enough that's why one of the reasons why I don't ever give my time, because I know that's coming, because I don't run a 3:30, and I'm happy with my 5-hour marathons. I don't care. But it's about, I know what's coming socially. And so I'm not, it's not that I'm not willing to put it out there. It's like, I'm trying to make sure that people understand that it's not about the time. It's about understanding the process. It's about being authentic and having the knowledge base and being humble. And it's like, I just finished the marathon. It doesn't matter if I didn't. I have friends and athletes that finish it sometimes in 8 hours for a variety of reasons. They still ran the marathon.
By the way, those are the heroes.
Yeah. And there's some great stories.
Imagine that kind of persistence and
exactly,
and resiliency.
Exactly.
To do that for 8 hours and finish it.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And I've had some clients going, I'm not going to stay on the course longer than 4.5 hours, and they don't. They finish, but there's that piece of judgment to it that well, some of us have to stay on the course that long, and some of us aren't built to do it in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Right. Or some of us aren't at that age. So here's a resiliency piece, because when you were talking about that, kind of like when some people don't have some of the skill sets, like I have asthma. I don't think most people, until maybe we just talked about it with the altitude sickness state, most people don't know that I've had asthma since I was little. I went all the way up through, was an elite level gymnast with asthma. Yeah. It was always a curse to me. I've been hospitalized for it, right? The whole 9 yards. And I run marathons with an inhaler on me. And I've had people say to me like, oh, you run them in 5 hours, or 5 minutes.
It's like, again, it's crazy.
And I don't ever say like, well, you have no idea what my physical limitations are. I'm just out there doing it for me. And I think that that's where the humility, and I'm saying that today, not to be like, oh, I have asthma and I can run. It's about, I don't care about your opinion, not yours, but you know what I mean? It's about having the confidence enough, like, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this for you to say, oh my God, you're such an amazing runner. I'm doing it because I raise money and I love the courses and I love the camaraderie of the people that I do the running with. And there's so much Benny to that knowledge base, authenticity, empathy, and humility that comes in that whole package that I love. That's why I keep returning to it. And so many of my athletes that I do see, even at high level, that don't have some of those physical limitations, that run in the 2s and the 3s, we work on those 4 pieces that I'm just talking about that they struggle, because if they did a 235 last year and they did a 242 this year, the enormity of how less than they feel. It's like, it's just a different day, different time.
Right.
It's just, whatever. But the beating up inside, and I get it because I've been at the elite level for gymnastics. So I know,
But their elite level, their self-image is based on their time.
Right.
Their entire self-image is wrapped up in the time. It's
wrapped up in that one aspect versus all the aspects. Like I just said, it's all these things for me of why I do. Right. And I would imagine, I know there's people listening that are runners, that they understand that there's all these aspects. Like there's one of the listeners today, he's run the Boston Marathon 30 plus times in a row.
Wow.
And there's got to be a sense of resiliency and amazing relevance to himself to do that. It's not just about time. It's
with a marathon, what else is there but resiliency? It's the whole challenge, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone can run.
Right.
Can you run for that long?
Well, and I always love it when people ask me, like, what was your favorite mile or what was your favorite aspect? Because that's such a great question, other than when you get what was your time?
Yeah.
As you know, I don't answer that. And it's not because I'm embarrassed. It's because I want you to ask me, like, oh, this is why I always tell a story.
Your experience with the event isn't wrapped up around time.
Right.
Yeah.
Mine is like, a couple of years ago, I was running down the hill in Hopkinton into Ashland, and some person jumped out in front of me from running out from the woods to get, a bathroom break, knocked me over, ripped my knee wide open. And I ran the rest of the race like that. And the fire department at the end ripped my pants off my knee because it was stuck with like rocks and glass. It was awesome. But that's my story, because I ran the whole thing and I didn't stop because I knew if I stopped, I'd be done. Yeah. And I was only a mile in. I was like, I'm only a mile in and I've already had a crash.
Yeah.
I'm bleeding, the whole pants. But that's so much more of my experience of having the marathon.
Your experience is resiliency.
Yeah. Like I could, or the year that we all ran, that was hypothermic year with the rain and sleet and snow misery. Yeah. And it was terrible. And
like every other year.
And I know. Yeah. And I think I told you that it was like every mile because I never looked up because it was pouring so hard. And I kept saying, I'll make it one more mile. And if I'm not hypothermic and not dead, I'll keep going one more mile. And finally, by the time I got to the top of BC, which is the top of Heartbreak Hill, I only had 5 miles left. I'm like, fine, I'll finish. But it was just that, mile by mile, which isn't the typical way I would do marathon, but it's to the resiliency of what was it for me? It wasn't about, not getting the medal at the end. Well, it kind of was for that, but because I like the Boston Marathon medals, but it's about finishing for yourself. It's about doing I knew my limit. I knew not to go towards the medical tent. I knew that it's easy to give up. I watch people do it. And that's like the test of, I have tons of runners right now because we're getting ready to do the Boston Marathon in October, odd time of year because it's shifted because of COVID. And the training has all been different. And the resiliency level, because of the weather, has been changed. And I'd say I roughly have a dozen runners right now that are running it as well as myself. And you can tell the shift in mental aspect of how they're training based on the fact that it's October. So the likelihood is, I always remind them, like, it could still snow, it could still rain. It's October 11th, the whole 9 yards, but it's just different. And so, because people have more confidence based on external that their running will be better because they've trained through the summer. And I don't see it that way. I just think it's a marathon any time of year, anywhere.
You just touched upon another skill of those that are resilient, I think, which is the ability to stay in the moment. Mm-hmm. Because we talk about to put in athletic terms, because people are usually fans and they at least understand that they haven't played. The cornerback's got to come back after giving up the touchdown. The pitcher's got to come back after giving up the homer. The golfer's got to come back after hitting a bad drive.
Right.
You got to be able to compartmentalize it, put it aside, and move forward.
Right.
So, being able to take it mile by mile in the marathon, for example, is a way of, I'm not doing 26 miles. I'm doing the next mile.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how I got through that marathon. It was just mile by mile. And that's when I ended up with the icicle in my shoe at the end in my sock.
So each result isn't a total, isn't a final verdict on who you are and what your skill level is.
But if you're heavily weighted on what other people think, it's a hard pattern to break. And so many people have that issue with, I'm doing it for that reason.
Yep.
they'll say that they're not, but when you sit in my office and we do hours of therapy around like what's going on that's getting in the way, 99% of the time, it's not because the person can't do the skill or they can't do the functionality of their job, whether it's an athlete or a business or a parent or whatever. It's because there's some external factor that really doesn't matter, but they put so much emphasis on it that's making their resiliency drop because it makes them vulnerable, and then they don't perform well.
How many people are fighting that first experience on the job, first impressions?
Yep.
The first time you had the in-laws over for Thanksgiving, that didn't go well. So it's 10 years later, but you're still fighting that. You're still battling that particular issue. That's still your self-image because you feel that's what they feel about you.
Right.
In the meantime, you've done it very well. You've done 10 years of Thanksgiving dinners. They've been great. But, you're always worried about the first one. You think everyone's thinking about the first one and judging you based on that.
Right. Exactly.
You're so concerned about their opinion.
Exactly. And so that's what happens across the board, whether it's athleticism or school or job or family or coupledom or whatever it is. That piece is always in there kind of pulling at the resiliency level and being able to shift it so that, modifying like, okay, that was 10 years ago, or that was, everyone has a rough time cooking for Thanksgiving at least once, or
everyone has blown a Thanksgiving meal.
Everyone's blown something once in their life. And there's where the compassion and empathy comes from, is if you know that about another, it's like, well, you got to do that for yourself. And if someone's going to give you a hard time about it, then you have to really regroup in your head about not yourself, but it really speaks more to that person that, if you've done a great performance, so to speak, you've done a great meal, you've done a great job, you've given your all to something, but you have some minor flubs here and there, or something that someone would judge you for. You have to look at that person versus yourself to say, what's really going on there? But people internalize it and go right to, I'm bad, because we're taught that.
As we're talking about it, I think one of the ways to build that is what we talked about earlier, is trying new experiences, because it's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
You try something new and you're not good at it.
Right.
But weeks later, you are good at it.
Right.
You make gains, and that gives you the ability, that gives you confidence in feeling, I can figure this out. I can do this. Look how far I've come. I couldn't do that yoga class 6 weeks ago. I couldn't do that particular move. I don't know what they're called. Stance, move, positions, pose. Yeah.
Downward facing dog.
Yeah. I couldn't do that 5 weeks ago. Now I can do it.
Right. Well, it's interesting.
And these are gains that help build your self-image.
So in talking about, like the human baton this weekend with new people that had been just introduced to, because what it is, it's jumping out of a plane and riding in a drift car and a rally car and riding on an endurance horse and jumping in a very small little boat that could flip you at 70 miles an hour, all those things. When I was talking to some new people that were being introduced to it, the excitement's there, but that I many times over Saturday night, I got the, I'm playing it in my head. A couple guys were like, "Oh, I can't do that," which was surprising because the people which I won't say who they are, but who they were, and the fact that it was so easy and quick to be like, "I can't do that."
Yeah,
and I'm like, it's like I'm doing it. Like, the only thing I won't do is jump out of a plane, but that's just because I'm afraid, and it's not because I'm worried about. I just am afraid. I don't want to do that. I don't want to jump out of a plane. Just want to do that.
Let me guess, though.
Yeah.
These are the type of people, that's the conversation that'll come up around the fire, but given some time to live with it, they build up the ability to.
Well, my comment back to these couple guys was that
it's a processing technique.
Yeah, it was like, I said, oh, you guys can, you can do that. I'm like, it's just, and like, you could be a couch potato and learn how to like start the process. And I gave a couple examples of how like I've helped a couple of people for other sports, and they're like, oh yeah, well maybe you could see it shift. I'm like, well, you're already an athlete, you've already done this. Yeah, but I don't do that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I don't jump out of planes and ride endurance horses or ever had been in a drift car or rally car before. Like, but I knew that, well, I mean, what can hurt to try?
Well, that's ego story setting.
Yes.
It's giving them position. It's giving them permission to fail.
Exactly.
I don't do that.
Right.
I'm not good at that. I can't
Right.
do that. And then
Right.
they're going to go out and do it anyway.
Or I'm too old. I got that a lot this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm too old to do that.
Yeah.
Person's like 45.
Yeah.
I'm too old. I'm too old
Yeah.
to do that. Well, you're not too old to do the challenges, right? You're not too old to do some push-ups with some claps in between.
But in the social circle with people that they like and admire,
right,
because of things otherwise, they've kind of set up they've softened the ground for what might not be a great performance. They're going to go out and kill it, but they've kind of softened the ground.
Right, because then yes, they have softened the ground. I like that.
Yeah.
So because then they don't have to actually live up to an expectation that they've set for themselves, as opposed to like,
yeah,
you know,
the expectation of set among the group is I'm not going to be able to do this.
Exactly.
And then anything is a success.
Exactly.
Which is fine. Because again, I think I'm guessing with the process, they just keep going and end up doing it anyway.
Well, yeah. And you'd see, so I'm in my head again thinking like, for the handful of people that I had that particular conversation with on Saturday was, I'm going to say one of the 4 or 5 that I was talking to probably wouldn't get there, just because I could tell by the dialogue of the negative mindset that it was good to watch them afar, but I would imagine just in knowing their history a little bit that, they're actually a good athlete, but this would just press them beyond that. They wouldn't be the saving face by not doing it would be better for them than actually going out and failing and looking poor in the performance, because it would emotionally annihilate them. You know,
they're out there. People are out there.
And that's what gives me a job, because I'm constantly helping people shift over from their youth training of negative and being very focused on, what people think. And everybody does it. We all do this. For someone to say, I don't worry about what other people think, it took me years, and I've said this to you, it took me years to say, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I still care. I mean, it's not that I don't care. It's just I don't let it infiltrate my psyche about like whatever. And there's a confidence level. And sometimes that pushes people, because when you have a confidence level that's based on like, it's okay. My confidence level, I have no problem sharing this, is not because I think I can do everything. It's I'm willing to try.
Yeah.
So I don't care if I don't look great. I don't care if I fall apart on it. I just want to try because it's something fun. It's something new. It challenges me. And I had to get past what will I look like if I don't do it well? Because I was trained in gymnastics that everything has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And it was on the gym walls. It was like a constant narrative. And so getting away from that took me many years to be able to say, I just don't care.
Oh, your perfection was quantified.
Yes.
At every performance level.
Yeah.
But I'm also guessing
points at deficit and starting at a 10 going backwards.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm guessing that's also because in your upbringing, the response to quote unquote failure, whatever it was.
Yes.
Bad test at school or something you shouldn't have done as a 4-year-old.
Yes.
That response.
Shame on me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That response, it was largely external and it was bad. So, there's a certain point, certain personalities get to a point in their upbringing where I was one of them. It's like at a point you say, screw it. I don't care I don't care what you think.
Well, yeah. And it doesn't usually happen
I did what I can
in your 20s. It usually happens in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Like it happened for me, like in my mid 30s, all of a sudden I started making a shift because I was working really hard at it, because I was like, I'm self-limiting.
Well, you're resetting your environment, because that in the 20s to your 30s is the time when you get out of your family environment and create your new environment.
Exactly.
Your new family, your new circumstances, your job, your relationship, stuff like that.
Exactly.
And you have a chance to set your own
boundaries, your own guidelines. Right. And I mean, it's great if you can do it sooner, which is when I see teenagers come in and I try to work with them and their parents on doing that now, versus like waiting, because I get people that are in their 50s and 60s and 70s that are just starting out working on that piece. And many people have that, that sense of.
I didn't get a lot of this till I was in my 50s.
Right.
And it's like, so now I look at my kids and it's like, no, you're going to get this before I did.
Well, and that's one of my goals. Is
I'm going to try to give this to you before, long before I did.
Clients and my athletes to get to that point of, it's not in. See the message in my head. So my narrative in my head was always, when you say you don't care, it means you're being selfish. That's a socially normed in thing that we're taught.
Don't care about other people's opinions.
And that's not what that means.
No.
It means I don't care about how I'm going to end up looking if I get to try it, if I get to experience it. I'd rather experience it than not experience it at all,
Right.
because I'm worried about what other people are going to think. And that is such a heavy-handed message that comes down the pike socially to our children now, psychologically. It has been for years. That's one thing that I consistently see not change. Like the trend doesn't change to parents teaching their kids to not feel that way.
Yeah.
We just consistently, I mean, it's always at the underbelly of almost all of my clientele, for whatever reason. And it's a skill I go right after for a goal, because people who have people say, what's your goal? I want to work on my self-esteem. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it's so global, because people come in with that big macro goal. I'm like, yeah, okay, but in 2 weeks, what does that look like? In 2 weeks, how does that, well, I want to be able to stand up in front of my class and be able to speak and not like get bright red. Okay, now we have something to work with. Why are you getting bright red? What is going through your head? And, you go through all the dynamics of, well, it's because the resiliency piece of the confidence isn't there. And the humility isn't there either. Even though the person's humble, they're so humble that they're so afraid that that they're in shame, that if they're not perfect, they're going to be bad. So they don't bother, or they just don't raise their hand. I mean, this is a gender thing heavily. And this is that boys tend to be much more fact-based. They'll blurt out things. They'll just be like, some fact on baseball or something. Whereas a female will be much more inclined to make sure that everybody's going to be okay with whatever they say, because we're definitely trained into that gender space of, we're going to be judged for what we say, as a girl.
Right. So the difficult teaching for a parent, which is not to care, to internalize your worth as opposed to externalize it. That's difficult to teach because parents generally don't have it all that strongly. Right. Secondly, they model the exact opposite message. Like, for example, you're going over the in-laws and you dress up the kids to look nice and things like that. That's caring what other people think. Yeah, right. It's innocent, it's relatively innocent, but it's, that's what you're modeling. But one thing you can do really easily, even if you don't have it yourself, is you can minimize and you can normalize failure. Yes. In other words, your kid goes out in a little league field and goes 0 for 4 with a strikeout. It's like, okay, well, we'll work on it. Let's get an ice cream. It's part of the process. It's part of the learning. It's part of the game. And that's what I teach. Yeah. I love the aspect of my job. Probably one of the best aspects of my job that I love the most is teaching parents and kids that failure. And I love the face that I get initially when I say, you're supposed to fail. Yeah. In the face I get. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? That's terrible. That's unacceptable. I'm like, no, failure, you have to fail. Without failure, you don't have other opportunities. You cannot always be perfect. Perfect doesn't allow you to have these things open up, to have other things happen for you. It doesn't allow you to change. It doesn't allow you to tweak something or gain knowledge. Did we have someone just come in the studio? Yes.
Okay. Oh, hello there. So when failure is part of it's a necessary part of the process. Yeah. If you aren't failing, you aren't trying new things. You're just doing the things that you already know how to do. But failure has such a bad connotation to it, right? Sure. So, I mean, listen to the word, fail. But so let's talk about addiction, right? Our favorite topic. Addiction, the model for recovery often has been presented over the past 25 years of, having change stages, and they used to neglect the failure relapse. Yeah. And relapse would always get dropped off. It would just be like, you're going to be contemplating getting sober. You're going to get sober. You're going to take action. You're going to maintain it. And now you've got your 4 or 5 steps to do that. And then all of a sudden, no one would say like, oh, by the way, you're supposed to relapse. Yeah. Well, what do you mean? Because, when I used to work 20 years ago in addiction heavily with veterans, I would say, you're going to relapse. 1 in 100 of you will make it without a relapse out of this room. Most of you will relapse. I think those odds are low, actually. The very quick response would be, that taken back, astounding. How could you say that? Yeah, well, you're telling me I'm going to fail. It's right. Yeah. But I would wait for it, because I would wait for that moment to say, You're supposed to, because every time you do that, you're learning something new to make sure that the next time you do it better. And eventually for you, Bob, it might be that you only do that once. And for Sue, it might be 4 times. But to allow for it to happen doesn't mean that you should just be like, I'm getting sober and then I'm going to go on a bender. It's about allowing yourself to have the opportunity to be imperfect, working at something, and vulnerable, and because that's how you build your character, your self-resilience, your self-esteem, and how it manages you to get away from the ego and being resilient and being real, authentic, having the humility. Look at that. It ties all back together, Lou.
The addiction community is particularly good at that because they accept failure, and there are people who fail dozens of times.
Yes.
And they just keep going. They keep walking them back in, but they don't encourage it, like you said, where it's like, okay, I can just have a bender. It's okay. Everyone's going to accept me. They don't accept it, but they accept it. You can fail, come back into the community and get help, but they're not encouraging you to do it either. They're not giving you permission to do it.
It's not, it's not that so what happens is that I'm going to tie this together with family. So when you go through a relapse on anything, food, gambling, shopping, eating, whatever it is, exercise.
No, X's.
X's. I thought you said exercise. Yeah, X's too. Yes. When you're going through that whole process, you're allowing yourself to say, you know what, I didn't know what I know now. And if I avoid it and I don't come back to it and I don't start from where I left off, not start from the beginning, if I don't start from where I left off, then I'm never giving myself the opportunity to actually move forward. And so we call that spin drying. People come in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, because they're just coming. And the old school way of doing addiction work or doing any kind of resiliency work is people come in, they do the same thing, you send them back out with no resources. That's not how I do that kind of work. I do my same work for whether it's a person in addiction or athlete or someone who's just struggling with their job. You're building resiliency. What skill are we building on that wasn't strong enough before that got you into a space where you went and did that thing?
What's the dual diagnosis?
Yeah.
What's the other problem that has undermined your ability? The
symptom of the problem is the alcohol, the eating, the X's, the drinking, whatever it is. It's the underlying thing, which is lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth, negative narrative label, whatever it is. And it gets them looped in and not even knowing, because it's so commonplace for that person to have that as their narrative.
And usually it's the self-image you were handed as a kid. Over and over and over again. You keep coming back to that. Right. And because you don't develop your own self-image, you're handed it.
You're built that with all the environmental influences, whether it's, here's the parent blame, parents, caregivers, extended family, coaches and teachers, and your peers, and peers' parents. So you're socially norming, even as a baby, all the time based on what you're given. So as a baby, you're being socially normed by your parents. Shame and guilt are right in the first 2 to 3 years, are all formed because you're looking at, right out of the gate, 0 to 1 years old, you're figuring out, do you trust the world or do you not trust the world? From like 1 to 2, 2.5, you're figuring out, do I have, any kind of autonomy versus any kind of doubt, because age appropriate autonomy, independence to the child. The child's learning how to potty train. They're trying to feed themselves. Do they get allowed to do that, or are they told you're not doing it good enough, or fast enough? Babies aren't going to be,
you can't do that. You're too young.
You're too young. Right. You walking up and down the stairs, it takes them a long time. So a parent will pick them up and move them. That's sending a message like you're not capable, and then by the time you're 3, 4, 5, you've got guilt already built in because, you take initiative and it's taken away from you because you didn't do it right enough. You didn't tie your shoes good enough. You didn't write with that pencil or stay within the lines with the crayons, and all these things that I see in kids building up. By the time I see them at even 9, 10 years old, I'm like, ugh. Ugh.
All right, I got to ask you before we
Yes.
finish, because you
Yeah.
started the conversation, having a conversation with this pilot, and you said you were talking about gender differences in resiliency.
Yes.
And I wanted to hear your thoughts on that because I formed some immediately.
Oh, did
on
you?
what
Well,
gender
I want to hear what
differences.
you formed. Let's see if they.
The first thought I formed about gender differences in resiliency is women are chronically resilient.
Yeah.
They can take long-term
beatings.
For lack of a better word, and they can stand up to it for a long period of time. Men can stand up to catastrophe.
Yeah.
And they can come back from a single event or something like that. But the chronic day-to-day, I think men struggle with more than women.
So, okay. So in that particular scenario, what I would say is men are wired more pragmatically to, it's like they, you guys don't hold grudges. You don't hold on to things. You don't accumulate. Women are much more accumulators and holder honors and a little bit more grudgy and, for lack of better terms. Right. So, but men compartmentalize. It's the crisis is there, it's over, it's averted, it's done. And then women tend to, it will be over, but it holds. It becomes a backdrop to the next thing. And we compartmentalize it, but we tend to psychologically use and manifest that for the next thing, which is why when you have couples, male, female couple, they'll get into this. How can you not remember when that happened? How can you not remember that you said that you would do that? How can you not? Because men have gone and compartmentalized, and their resiliency is based in the fact that they compartmentalize it. Whereas women's resiliency comes into, I'm going to protect myself because I know what happened last time. And this is not going to happen to me again. So I'm going to point out that happened.
Men will reshuffle the deck. Women will play that hand till the drop dead.
Well, that's a way of putting it, Lou.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be one way of looking at it.
And there's general stereotypes, but still.
Yeah. So there's we're neurologically, if you just look at the genetic coding, right? We're just neurologically more, we're both in survival mode. And those are the survival techniques that we have to become resilient, so that we remember the bear in the back of the cave versus some men will walk back into the cave forgetting that there was the bear because that was the last time, but that didn't remember that. Right. Yeah. And that's, again, stereotyping, but it's sort of to give the metaphor that women will be like, don't go in caves. Whereas men will be like, I'm going back in that cave.
Yeah.
Right.
Bear wasn't so bad.
Yeah. The bear wasn't so bad.
I can take that bear.
Exactly. So, and so they're both resiliency, but just in different ways. Yeah. And the better they're fostered, or the I think that goes to those four things. The more humility, the more knowledge, the more empathy, and the more authenticity in each of those patterns, then just the better stamina of the person to be able to be fact-based and put it out there and be who they are without apology.
And hopefully you show that complementary skill set.
Yes.
To your kids. You model that for your kids. And
right.
So hopefully they pick up a little bit of both ways of dealing with it.
Right. And so into that point, not passing the buck on, I have several children in my practice that the parents will, that just made me think of this. The parents will often say things like, what's wrong with your self-esteem? Why don't you have any? And I'm like,
unclear on the concept. Yeah.
I'm like, I twitch in the back of my head going, really? Yeah. Really? You don't know why? Because it's externalized. Like, it's not us. We didn't have anything to do with whether or not you have self-esteem or not, but that's for another show.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. So resilience and relevance. So to have it is to just keep building on the things that we talked about today, and being able to really work on being genuine to yourself and having the humility for yourself, and being able to say, it's okay that I don't care if I fail or I look imperfect, because I'm a human being. And if for someone to say anything else and they're better, well, that's lovely.
Go put yourself in that position. Go start a new class and be the person who knows nothing or can't do anything, and then learn and grow.
Learn and grow. Growth mindset, right? So before we end today, Lou is going to put up on the
oh no, I'm not. I'll put it in the
Oh no, you're not. Okay. So Lou was supposed to put up God, you're fired already.
Well, jeez. I gotta get it from text to email and email Good to Lord. Over here. Right. And
so it's 60 days
in the
away.
Comments.
It's 60 days away. Listen to me.
Yes.
Listen. Listen, Lucy. It's 60 days away from the Boston Marathon. I'm raising $10,000. Well, actually $9,250 or $9,750 left because I haven't done it yet for my wonderful charity, the New England Patriots Foundation, which is a fantastic feeder charity for 26 New England charities that get picked every year from applicants of 200 to 300 a piece of different charities around the New England. And we just had this year's, and it was absolutely wonderful. A great charity down in Brockton won the whole $25,000, and each of the other charities got $10,000. But it goes to things that are related to children and domestic violence and veterans and animal funds and women's causes and men's causes and you name it. And it's always different every year, but it's a great way for me to be able to go out and run the Boston Marathon course this year in October, but also to help give back to the community. So the link will go up. Anything, all and anything, $5, $10, $500 makes it easier for me to get there faster. Would be happy for you to go on and help me out. And so 60 days away, I just have to raise in 60 days. But that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
See, I got it up.
You what?
I got it up. Look at the screen.
Oh, Lou got it up.
And it's in the comments too, and you can actually link right from the comments.
So Lou has put up the link, and I will also be adding some things on.
But look in the comments. You can actually click on it in the comments.
You can click in the comments. I see it sort of because I'm blind as a bat. But I will also be adding in the next week or so a little kind of giveaway for like people that give towards a square towards football squares. I'm going to give some Patriots tickets away and do some other things. So, but you will be, if you give $100 or more, you will likely be entered into that drawing to do that, to win those tickets. So anyway, so you guys have a great day. Go out and be resilient and notice whether or not you have relevance.
Put yourself in position to fail. Put
yourself in position to fail, and be okay with it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the message of the day.
Yep.
All right. And Lou, next week, Huckleberry.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
All right.
Huckleberry pie?
No, just huckleberries.
Just huckleberry. Okay.
All right, you guys. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week.